there everybody, my name is Bailey Carpenter and this is lesson 3 out of 4. So today's lesson is all about understanding points of views in a text, but in this case for this class it's 2. So I would give them an assigned text, whatever it may be, and have them do some reading previously to this, and that would create the first 2 rough drafts for lesson 1 and 2 and all those processes, and then in lesson 3 we would go into discussing it. So I would give the example. Hopefully everyone here, all my classmates or all my students behind the camera, understand the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears. If not, I could always briefly explain. I could pull up a video or an explanation, but basically it's this young girl who goes into the house of 3 bears, a baby bear, a mom, and a dad bear, and basically eats their food, sleeps in their bed, ransacks the place for whatever reason, and then the 3 little bears come back and they're mad and they're upset, and yeah. So what I really want to go into today, students, is not only understanding the viewpoints in a text, but also understanding the do's and don'ts. So I would go maybe 5 minutes in the beginning of explaining what we want to do for the day, the learning target, which would be understanding viewpoints in a text and interpreting them and talking about them and then eventually writing about them. And then I would give the example of Goldilocks and the 3 little bears. And then I would say, first, we would establish that there's 2 character sets in this story. So we have Goldilocks and the 3 little bears. Although there's 3 little bears, they all have the same agenda, and Goldilocks has the same agenda for herself. So 2 main sides, 1 and 2, draw a line between them because it's kind of a fight situation. And then we would talk about how Goldilocks sees this whole thing, her viewpoint in this text, is an opportunity, op for short. And then the whole thing with the 3 little bears, as they see this as an invasion. So there's 2 perspectives right there out of a children's story that we can pull out and dissect individually, but there's also the portion of being an outside person from this story and looking inward and seeing both as a whole. So that's something that we need to talk about as a class about our text, which say is Shakespeare, for example. You know, Shakespeare's perspective, his servant's perspective, you know, everyone's perspective within the stories. So something that we want to touch on really closely is the do's and don'ts. So I would give the class maybe 5 minutes, pen, paper, write down what they think just off the top of their head so we can get kind of a formative assessment idea of what do's and don'ts are. So 5 minutes for the class, I would take 5 minutes, and of course I would have a ton of them written down and memorized. I wouldn't just be doing it off the cuff like I am right now, but 5 minutes. So ding, 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 time's up, right? So I would say, all right class, share with me some basic do's and don'ts. And although this is what I wrote down, maybe they'd say, oh, a do would be follow closely. So following closely means give every bit of detail as concisely but as fully as possible. So don't go halfway through the story to the end and then go back to the beginning. Go from start to finish, point A to point B, very smoothly and concisely and giving enough detail but without boring your readers. But a don't would be jumping around. So going from, you know, this happened and then this happened and then that happened, but all in the wrong order, because that does not create validity, and that's what we're going for in establishing different viewpoints in a text. So I would tell that to all my students, and they would have, you know, examples of what they thought of, like picking a side. So this is something I would not only have them understand, but have them do. So when I introduce the paper, I'd say, you know, when we're seeing multiple viewpoints in a text, I would want you to pick a side. So if there's Goldilocks' side, and there's a 3 little bears side, and then there's your perspective as a side, you need to pick one. And then going into that, a don't would be no changing. So if you chose, you know, Goldilocks in the beginning, don't halfway through be like, but I also understand how mad the bears would have been, you have to keep with one idea. So going into that, we would also talk about how in our rough drafts, we want to be able to establish kind of a clear theme, a clear thesis, which then in turn creates validity. So in that, I would tell them as homework to type up their current rough drafts. They should have at least 1 or 2 by now between lesson 1 and 2, and then create a bigger, more full, longer, a little bit more collected thoughts kind of coming towards the end of the lesson segment of this paper, and have them type it up as homework and then bring it in for lesson 4. I would end the lesson by giving them maybe 5 or 10 minutes to not only talk to me either in front of the class or privately, and talk amongst each other and ask questions and share ideas about what they think they want to either write about, questions or thoughts, comments, concerns based on the example I gave with Goldilocks and the 3 bears, and tell them good luck on their typed page paper, and I'll see them for lesson 4 for peer review.